This is the road to wholeness.
Well, hey, everybody, we want to welcome you to the Road to Wholeness. I'm your host, Josh Hawk, and today I've got a very special friend of mine, Pervis Taylor. He is a life coach in New York City, and he is an author of several books. He's got a brand new book coming out, too, that I know he can't wait to tell you about, and I can't wait to for all of you guys to go and get that book as well, too. But, man, Pervis is just such an amazing person, and welcome to the show today, man.
Wow. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm grateful to be here.
Absolutely. Well, you know, you're just one of those guys. I'll never forget the very first time that we ever just chatted on the phone. I literally was just like, man, I wish that this was a podcast right now so that we could just hit record because, you know, it was just golden, the stuff that was coming out of that conversation. And so as I was looking at this season, I said, man, I've got to get Pervis on the show so that we can just have a very candid, casual conversation, really no notes, but just like, man, this is who you are. This is who I am. And this is our roads to wholeness and just how all that goes together, Pervis.
Yeah, no, I agree. You and I definitely have had some wonderful in-depth conversation. I was just like, wow, should be written down, or it could be a book.
Yes.
Possibly. Just the things we've gone over. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now. You've got this new book, Heal Forward, right? And so tell us a little bit about that, some of the concepts that are in that book, man.
Yeah, no. So I'm really excited about this book. It's called Heal Forward, and it's written for men. And the reason why I wrote the book is that I wanted men, whoever read the book, actually, whoever reads the book, to flourish. You know, I recently heard about this New York Times article where so many people have been languishing, and they're saying that the opposite of languishing is flourishing. And I was like, wow, yeah, that's why I'm writing this book, because I want men to flourish and to thrive and to be whole and to heal. You know, a lot of times men heal with the past in mind, and women heal with the future in mind. And so I wanted men to start healing with the future in mind, not just fix the past and stop there, but know that healing is for the rest of your life. So you need to heal forward. So that's what the book is about. And it's, I have in my last book, I had the 4 A's, which is Surthrival Mode, which is acknowledgement, acceptance, articulation, and alchemy. This book, I have the 4 V's of Heal Forward, which is vision, verification, vulnerability, and voice. And those are the things that are needed to heal forward.
Yeah, I love that. I love those two. I'd love for you to talk about those two for a minute, of vision and vulnerability, and then you guys go get the book and read the rest of those. But I would love for us just to start there with vision for a moment, because let's just be honest. There's a lot of men out there who have been very beat up over the years, and I know even your story, man, of just even you were homeless at one point, and now you're coaching celebrities, and I mean, it's just incredible what God has done with you moving forward. But I think when life happens, so many times people just stop dreaming. They stop having a vision for their life. And as the Bible says, where there's no vision, then people will perish. Right. And so tell us about what you're really talking about with that concept of vision.
So it's funny. So in the book, I use one of my favorite movies, which is The Dark Knight Rises. And I talk about how Batman and Bruce Wayne, the same person, are thrown into a pit. And that's analogous to like Joseph, right? Thrown into a pit. And I thought, and I go into depth about how he got out of the pit was he envisioned himself out of that pit.
Yes.
And that's the thing that I want men to do, is to engage a little bit more in imagination versus rumination.
Yes.
I think a lot of times women don't know how cerebral we are as men and how we have so many thoughts in our mind. And that's what's, oftentimes when we're silent, we're thinking about things that they have no idea.
Yeah.
And so I want men, my purpose of writing that chapter is for men to just engage in imagination, knowing that you have to see your way out of a situation before it can even happen. Yeah. And so like I use the parallel of Batman, which I feel like a lot of men can relate to.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that was the thing. I just want men to start dreaming again. I want men to not be ashamed of their dreams, to not even be afraid to dream, because I know that there's a fear attached to dreaming, because we've been let down so much by life. But I think that's the thing that keeps you living, is having a dream in your heart. And so like, that's the thing. I want men to have a vision for the life that they want.
Yeah, that's so good. And I'm so glad that you talk about imagination too, because I think that I heard a quote from C.S. Lewis one time that right after he met the Lord, he basically started this prayer saying, God, redeem my imagination. Yeah. And out of his imagination came the Chronicles of Narnia, came all of these amazing things that he was able to write. But I believe that it started with that prayer of God, redeem my imagination. And it seems like maybe that's a theme there too, for some of the things that you're talking about, of going, like, there's some men out there that their imaginations have been wrecked by porn. Their imaginations have been wrecked by, bad father figures that have been in their life. Their imaginations have been wrecked by, I was going after this dream in my 20s and now I'm 40 and I don't feel like I'm anywhere near where I want to be. And so, talk to me about that, and how that simple prayer of God, redeem my imagination, could bring a lot of traction in men's lives.
Well, and that's the thing, like, I'm looking, I'm using imagination in the most positive way, right?
Yes.
And I'm using rumination in the most negative way. And rumination is the opposite of imagination, right? Is playing those negative moments over and over and over and over and over again, right? And that thoughts become flesh if we think them long enough, right?
Right.
And so, like, to your point, how I arrived at where I am today was because of my imagination. At the time, my father died of a heroin overdose. I was living in a horrible situation. So many things came to surface. But the thing that, obviously God's grace, but the thing that really saved me was my imagination. I started to imagine myself being on TV, talking about whatever. I started to imagine myself speaking in front of crowds. I started to imagine myself just out of that situation. And guess what happened?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
So those things, what you focus on, your body will follow.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, that's the point of imagination. Like, even if you don't reach the fullness of it, you will achieve so much more than what you could have thought that you would have, right? Yes. And so I haven't reached the pinnacle of my imaginations yet, but I have reached so much more than what I ever thought.
And in doing that, you're kind of attracting what you are imagining too, you know? And so if I'm just going into work as a man and, or a woman, if you're listening to this as well too, but, if I'm just going into work and imagining, oh man, this is going to be the worst day ever. My boss hates me. I hate this job. I hate these people that are around me. Well, then what are you attracting towards you? Right. But if I'm going in there and I'm going, you know what, hey, I may not love this job that I'm in right now, but I'm thankful for it. I'm surrounded in my now, right, with these beautiful people that are around me. I'm going to go in and I'm going to make the best of this situation while also imagining where I could be beyond this as well too. Then probably you're going to attract some good relationships and probably some good blessings that are coming your way too, right?
And opportunities, right?
Yes.
I had no experience in being a life coach, in doing any of those things. But when I just imagined myself being the best life coach, and I got my first paying gig out of nowhere. It was literally like, I met this woman on a panel and she was like, yo, excuse me, I'll buy 100 books from you for my first book. I'll buy 100 books if you speak to my kids or do a session with my kids. And it was like, that really came out of me imagining, like, I really believed in myself and I really saw things happening well for me.
Yeah.
And that was like the first time in my life that I'd ever had that.
Yes.
Because I had spent so much of my life ruminating over the abuse, over the molestation, over the bullying, over, and my imagination was more used for escapism rather than manifesting or attracting the things that I wanted to have in my life. And so that's what I'm saying, like, being intentional about imagination, making time to dream, being intentional about that. That's the thing that I really want to drive home. You have to make time
Yeah.
To have a vision.
So how does that work practically? How do you make time? How do you personally make time to sit down and dream and imagine and write that down? What does that look like for you?
Oftentimes because I'm afforded, a lot of time because I work for myself. So I'm kind of more in charge of my time. But I typically do it in the morning and at night, when I'm praying. Like I'll just sit in this room that I have on my floor, and I'll just literally just imagine. I'll look up to the sky and just start dreaming and just start looking, saying like, yo, I want that to happen. I want that to happen. And just allowing it to be and believing it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that's the hard thing, is like
Yes.
believing that is possible for you.
Yes.
And, in spite of all the things that we've been through, in spite of, like, yes, that can happen for you. And so that's what I do. So I'll set aside like even 5 minutes a day.
Yeah.
And just, daydream.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I love that phrase that you just said too. Yes, that can happen for you. And I think it's important to not only believe that for you personally, but I also think that that's really important for you to believe that God is wanting that for you too. I think a lot of people think that God is up there and he's just got his will and he's going to crush it down on us no matter what. Right. And if it's suffering or it's pain or whatever. And that's where I just go like, no, he's a good father. Like he's the best father in the whole there is no better father. He's been father from the very beginning, before there was ever even humanity. He was father to Jesus. And so he wants good things for us. He wants us to imagine and partner with us to bring amazing things out of the gifts, out of the talents that he has for us. Right.
It's true. And it's funny. One thing Oprah said this years ago, and it never left my spirit. She said, God can dream a better dream than you, a bigger dream than you.
Yes.
And I was like, wow, like that has never left me. Like, of course he can dream a bigger dream. So the dreams I have for myself, God has bigger.
Yes. Yes. Come on.
And so it's about aligning myself with that, right?
Yes.
It's about believing and knowing, right?
Yes.
Believing and knowing that he has a bigger dream for me and that it will come to pass, right?
Yes.
And I think that's the beginning of it, right? So it's like, I think the most difficult part of the whole situation is to actually sit and dream.
Right.
And I think the other part becomes easier. I'm a living witness. Like I would have never thought that I would be on TV being interviewed or be known for anything, right? But I had a dream that would happen.
Yep.
And it did.
Yep. Yeah. And you begin to follow that. And then you begin to put the hard work into place to see that come to fruition too. You didn't just sit around and dream and write in your dream journal that you're going to do this and this. You went out and you actually wrote the words down on a computer screen, and you actually, went and you began coaching people, and you began speaking, and you began doing these things. Right. And so there is something to dreaming, and then also starting and putting action to your dreams. Right.
But that's the, faith without works, so that was like the faith and works working together.
Yes.
Because I believed that was possible for me, I started to act on it.
Yes. Exactly. And that's where I just want to encourage everybody that is watching or listening to this right now. You have these dreams, you have these things written down in a journal, and it is time for you to begin to act. It's time for you to begin to go after those things. Just do the work. That's something that I felt like the Lord had been telling me this week. It's just, Josh, just show up and just do the work, and don't let it matter like who's looking or who's not looking, or who's saying something about it or who's not saying something about it. You just show up and you do the work, and let me take care of the rest. But you do the work and good things will happen.
And that's the thing. It's like, I've been doing this work for over 10 years when no one was looking.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it was about the work and knowing that that's what God created me to do.
Yeah.
I experienced so many things, hardships while doing what I know I was supposed to do. But I knew that this is what God wanted me to do.
Yeah.
And so to your point, it is about that. And I'm looking at me being consistent all of those years. And now look what's happening. Opportunities, bigger platforms, things are happening for me. But that was because I believed the dream and I just kept doing the work.
Right.
And I wasn't doing it for that. I was doing it
Yes.
because I wanted to fulfill what I believe God created me to do.
Yes, exactly. And that's so important too, that you just mentioned that you weren't doing it for it, but you were doing it to fulfill what God has put in you and created you to do. And then I also think one of the factors that has probably gotten to you to where you are today, which is the second thing that I wanted to talk about from your book there, is vulnerability. I was just thinking about vulnerability over the last couple of weeks, and I thought about Jesus for a moment, and have you ever seen a picture of Jesus without underwear on? If you think about the paintings of Jesus on the cross, he always has underwear on.
Yeah.
And I've got a sermon in me, because I preach a little bit too sometimes. And I got a sermon in me called Jesus Didn't Wear Underwear, and because what is so good about that is, like, no one felt like they could paint Jesus completely vulnerable.
Right.
No one felt like that they could paint Jesus or just, really do that. Maybe somebody did, but the ones that I've seen always have him with underwear on, because it's too much to paint God totally naked, right? He's still got to have some dignity. But that's what's so amazing about Jesus and what God did through him, that he was totally stripped of everything, totally vulnerable, totally naked. And in that moment of weakness was actually his greatest strength.
Absolutely. And, when I think about vulnerability and actually, using Jesus as the example, with vulnerability, there's always risk involved, right? But there's also reward. And many times we don't think about the reward aspect. Vulnerability is the ability to let your guard down so the most authentic, sacred, and fragile you can be seen.
Yes.
And with the risk of that, you can get hurt.
Yes.
Right. But also the reward is you can get healed.
Yes.
And so that's the thing, right? For me, it's always like, I always thought about vulnerability in the aspect of reward as opposed to risk. I do consider,
right.
The risk factor, but I often think about the reward factor, which is why I was able to do the work that I did. I never thought about the fact that I could fail. It did cross my mind, but I thought about, but I can win. This could be the thing that could help me to get over to the place I need to get to.
Yeah.
And I think when you think about vision or having a dream or living out the life that you want to have for yourself, there is a risk involved, but there's also the reward aspect.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what, Jesus, the reward was, he's our savior.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. The redemption of humanity, right?
The redemption of humanity. That's the reward.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So talk to me about what vulnerability looks like practically for you, how you put this into practice in daily use, when you're coaching, when you are speaking, like what does vulnerability look like for you?
So for me, it's say I struggled, say I fell back into porn, right? Say I just did I fornicated. Say I did something like that. Vulnerability for me is being brave enough to share with an accountability, whether it be my therapist, whether it be someone, accountability partner, and letting them see where I am, right? That safe space, identifying that safe space. With clients, if I don't have it that day, if I'm not in the space that I need to be in, it's me saying like, okay, we need to reschedule. I'm taking a mental health day, or you know what I mean? Like it's really being transparent and allowing people to see your fragility.
Yes.
And so that's something that I just incorporated into my life because I have to.
Yeah. And how have you seen that as a strength? So like what you just mentioned there, I think is huge. Okay. Because I believe in vulnerability. I believe in transparency, but some people would be like, well, you're a life coach, so you should have your, whatever together. And you're texting me saying that you need to take a mental health day. Like all of a sudden, wouldn't most people be afraid that if I text a client that all of a sudden this client isn't going to want to see me anymore? Cause they're thinking like, what in the world? This guy's weak. This guy's whatever, but how has that actually been the opposite for you?
Well, it makes my clients want to share more. Because exactly. I think people are looking for something that's tangible. They don't want to look for perfection. They want to look for someone who's perfected.
Yeah. Being sanctified, being perfected. Yeah.
Being sanctified. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's like, they want to know that. I also think that for a lot of, I had one client in particular, she was just like, I thought you were perfect. And she said, it always made me feel condemned, speaking to you at times. And I was like, I'm far from it. I just, was just in tune with, where your journey. And I couldn't relate to some aspects of it, just honestly speaking, but I can relate to other aspects. And once I started to share more about my narrative, it was like very disarming for her. And that helped her to get on the journey that she's on now.
Yes. Yeah, I know. I was coaching somebody a week or two ago, and this guy could not see how sharing some of his struggles with his team would actually be the best thing that he could possibly do. And I said, man, everybody sees it. Everybody knows it. You need to say it out loud to them and watch them actually come to your side. And the people that don't, you probably don't really want them around you anyways, right? The ones that are expecting you to be God essentially, or this savior, or this guy or girl who has it all together at all times. Listen, that person does not exist on the face of the planet. It doesn't matter who you are or what level you're at. That person just doesn't exist, right?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And the thing is, only what you confess can be healed. And so, confess your sins to one another that you may be healed, right? That's in the book, the good book. And so like, yeah, what you said was absolutely spot on. And I think that's the thing. It's like, at this point, if it turns you off that I'm being vulnerable, to your point, then we're not a good fit to work together. Or this relationship may not work out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But I know I have to always be true to myself, because I know what it feels like to walk around.
Yes.
Screaming at a frequency that only I could hear.
Yes.
And what I feel good.
Yes. And what I think that also does is it takes, what I would call the shame factor out of it, right? Like so many people feel shamed for having this issue or this issue. And what we need to do and what we need to be is a culture that is actually going like, in vulnerability is strength, and there is no shame. There is no condemnation for those that are in Christ Jesus. There is no shame. And we need to get that out so that we can, then move forward and actually step into healing.
And that's the thing, to your point. It's like, yes, I've struggled with porn, but that's not who I am.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that's what the vulnerability does. It allows you to still be in tune with who you are, right? And who you are not. And I think that's something that people don't think about. I think when we're protecting ourselves, we're beating ourselves up.
Yeah.
When you're protecting yourself, inwardly, because I've done it before, right? We've all done it. When we're not vulnerable, we're holding all this shame on the inside. We're holding everything in, right? But when you're vulnerable, it allows you to be affirmed in who you are.
Yes.
But for me, if I do slip up, if I do make a mistake, how I feel about myself and who I know myself to be and who I know God to be is not altered.
Yes.
Because I've done, you know what I mean? Because I've settled that. And so like, that's the thing that vulnerability has helped me to do.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. Well, I want to ask you a different question. And I want to ask you just like, what are some things on your heart right now that you just go, man, this is what I feel like people really need to know. This is something that if I'm just sitting down with a client or someone that is chatting with me, and this is like a burn that's on your heart. What is that right now? What would you want to share with our listeners?
It's funny. I say this all the time. Life happens to us, but life also happens from us. And people say for us, but life happens from us.
Yes.
And I think about the times of darkness that I've been in my life, or even just recently with releasing this book, so many attacks happened with me releasing Heal Forward. So many things to the point where I was so close to not releasing it.
Wow.
But then I thought about all the things that I've been through just even recently, and the life that came from me, which is this book, which people have been reading. They're like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is changing my life. I think about all the dark times in my life and how I defeated it by having life happen from me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's the thing, like when life ceases, right, happening from us, then we are dead. You could be alive, but you can be dead at the same time.
Yeah.
And so I believe out of every depression, out of every dark place, out of every bad situation we go through in life, no matter how grave it is, life can happen from us. I think about Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, right? These mothers lost their kids to drunk drivers, which is horrible. Mm-hmm. That's hard to get over. But I think about the life that happened from them. They created an organization to prevent this from happening to other mothers.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so like, that's life happening from them. And so like, that's the thing I always want us to be aware of. And even for myself, and that's why I'm speaking so boldly right now, is that I have to remind myself that life also happens from me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. And one of the things that is so great too, is you can tell that you are actually passionate about what you're saying, and that causes me to want to believe it. And I think that's something else that we've got to do, is we've got to always, I heard a guy talking about this the other day, and I just thought, wow, this is so good. Like really actually be passionate about what you are doing, right? And like really believe that this book that I'm about to put out could change someone's life. Like, I really believe this conversation right now that we're having can change someone's life. If I don't, then let's just close the thing, turn off the mic and let's leave. Right. But there's people out there that are doing something. And I want to challenge you to be able to go, like, do you really believe that? Like believe what you're doing can change someone's life. And it may just be that you're bagging groceries right now, but do it in such a way where you're then talking to people that are coming through the grocery store, and you have one conversation or one look at somebody that just goes, hey, I want you to know that at this grocery store, this smile that I'm giving you means something, because you may be the one person, right, that smiles at that person that needed to see that smile because somebody hasn't been smiled at in weeks, right? Just even in little things like that.
It's funny. I watched on Good Morning America the other day about these kids who are in NICU, kids who have cancer, like babies and stuff, and how this one nurse, like how she makes all of these kids smile, even if they're going through chemo, like they just start smiling as soon as she comes into the room. And it's funny, like this nurse assistant, she's a nurse assistant, and it's like she's not even a full nurse, but she's making such an impact on these kids. The life that's happening from her is in many ways just as powerful as the treatment and the doctors, if not more, because these kids are smiling. Like as soon as she comes into the room, it's like they light up, and they could have just thrown up before she came into the room, but they feel it's like she lights up the room. And to your point, that's what it's about, the life happening from you. It may not be global. It could be local, but local is just as important as global.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it may just be to the one that day, like really looking at your life. The question that I ask is, how can I bring value to 5 people every single day? Yeah. 4 of those being my wife and my 3 kids, and then at least one other person. And if I've done that, then I've won that day. Right.
Yeah.
How can I bring value to at least 5 people, and or 3 or 2, or who is your one, but really going through that, then that gives me a purpose that day right there in just that statement. Right. And that means I'm going to eventually see forward momentum carry me, because intentionality breeds momentum. The more intentional I am in something, the more momentum I'm going to see. Right. Mm-hmm. And so the more intentional I am in just adding value over and over and over again, is the more you're going to look back at your life and be like, wow, look at all that happened because I was intentional with the now. I was intentional with the little moments in life.
And it's crazy. You never know whose life you've impacted. Like I've met people who I've never, like, I don't recall meeting them. They're like, oh my God, you've changed my life. And I'm just like, wow.
Yes.
You know, like, you know, they may have read a book, or they may have saw me speak, or they saw an interview or heard a podcast interview. And again, that's the life happening from us. And I always have to remind myself of that, even when times are not going the way that I want them to go, is that, you know, you're still in purpose, you're still of value, you're still of use, even though things are not going the way you want them to go. And that's the thing about, you know, Heal Forward. It's like you heal for the rest of your life.
Yes. Yes. Well, I think that's an amazing place to stop right there. Heal Forward, because you're going to be healing for the rest of your life. It is an ongoing thing, and that is just an amazing concept. I want you to go out, go to Amazon.com, Heal Forward, Pervis Taylor. Check him out. I know that, you know, that book will change your life. Thank you so much, brother, for all the things that you're doing. I hope New York is great to you right now. I'd love to be in New York this time of year in the fall. That's my favorite time to go. So I need to come up to New York and spend some time with you. And you can take me to some good pizza places and actually a Broadway show, right? They're back on, right? Come on.
Yes, they're back on. They're back on. Come on up, brother.
Well, bless you. Thank you so much for everything you're bringing to the world. And I know this conversation is going to bless a lot of people.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Love you, man. See ya. Hey guys, you've been listening to The Road to Wholeness, and I want to encourage you to check out www.streamsofwholeness.com or go to joshhawk.com for more resources on how we can help you on your road to wholeness.